I wanted to make this video a while ago, but this week has been insane. My mom was in the hospital for 3 days. Luckily it turned out to be really easy to treat, so she's okay. I started the semester, and it's been, and my financial aid reward was really low. It was about $276 for the first half of the semester, and then $276 again for the second half of the semester, and that's really not enough to live on. So I'm gonna have to borrow money from my family again. That's just what happens. But anyway, I've been wanting to make this video. I know that my next video was supposed to be about trans men, but as I was writing the script and doing research for the video, there's something that I need to bring up that I haven't really addressed on this channel. In fact, I don't think I've really addressed my gender identity much. One of the things I wanted to say was that, and I think I've mentioned this a few times on Twitter, is that I'm not entirely a man. Like, I'm trans. I was born, assigned female at birth. I transitioned to be a man. But as I've gotten older, the more I've thought about it, the more I've been like, I don't think I'm completely binary. And I've played around with different labels, genderqueer, gender fluid, non-binary, all that kind of stuff. And nothing's really stuck with me. And then I found, like, bigender, which, if you don't know what bigender is, it's essentially, it means, like, both genders, so, like, male and female. Though I personally understand it less as a binary thing, and more as, like, multi-gender, which I don't know if that's a thing. It probably is a thing. It's always a thing, I just like the sound of bigender more. It also would go with, because I'm bisexual, so I really don't believe that bi necessarily has to mean binary. I don't care if it's, like, grammatically correct. All this stuff is made up anyway. So I've been thinking about bigender because I am really still very connected to womanhood, and for a long time it was difficult for me to process that because I was so dysphoric, my early transition. But as I've gotten farther on and I'm much happier with how I look, speaking of how I look, I'm sorry I'm not wearing a shirt, but it's really fucking hot, so I'm not gonna wear a shirt. I usually don't wear shirts around the house. Like, I usually sit around in shorts all day with no shoes on. I'm like I can't help it. We're like Okies, okay? We're like Okie Mexicans. I don't know how to explain it. Anyway, back to the topic. So I am still really connected to womanhood, and, like, the more I've been online, and, like, I'm in a lot of women-centric spaces, specifically a lot of, like, WLW, or women loving women spaces, and in a weird, I don't know how to explain it, but, like, let me go back to the beginning. Okay, when I was younger, a teenager, before I came out as trans, before I even knew I was trans, I identified as a lesbian. I was attracted to men, but I never dated them. I didn't like them, so it's kind of like a bi-lesbian, if you've ever heard of that. Like a political lesbian, but not political, more social. I chose to only date women, is basically my point. And that was probably the highlight of my teenage years, because my teenage years were pretty bad. So as I've gotten older, I've been away from that for a long time. I've avoided women's spaces because they made me dysphoric for a long time. And now that I've spent more time in them, I've sort of felt like a reconnection. Like, because now I'm so much more confident in my identity and my body and that sort of thing, that I can explore that part of myself which made me so dysphoric. And I don't know if other trans people have ever felt this before, but like, you know, trans people always say, you know, I wasn't raised a girl, or I wasn't raised a boy, or whatever. You know, I was always a man. I was always a woman. And I don't know if that's true for me. I haven't really told anyone in my personal life about this because it is so confusing. And I've worked so hard to be seen as a man. Like, I've trained everyone around me to see me as a man. I've really cultivated a kind of masculine identity. You know, even though sometimes I can be very femme and very queer, you know, I've tried most times to appear performatively masculine for my own safety and comfort, but I'm really not comfortable in it. And I don't want to confuse you guys about that. The reason I am starting to call myself bigender is not because I'm feminine and masculine. It has nothing to do with gender presentation. Because you can be a trans man and be feminine. That doesn't make you bigender. But when I say masculinity or femininity, what I'm really trying to say, but I'm just being really confusing, is like, I don't know how to explain it, like a connection to manhood or womanhood. Like, okay, remember, if you're trans, remember when you first started to realize you were trans and you felt that connection to your true gender. You know, like for me, I was, you know, assigned female at birth. I felt connections to manhood. Like, this is where I really belong. It's like that. And now I feel kind of a pull from many sides, both sides, whatever you want to call it, where I connect with womanhood and manhood. And sometimes I feel like I'm neither, or both, or kind of in the middle, and that's why I tend to just call myself queer, because it's easier. But I do like the term bigender, and I'm kind of playing around with it, seeing how it fits. If I really like it, I may start using it in my offline life, private offline life. Publicly, though, I'm probably still going to, publicly offline, I'm probably still going to present and call myself male, just because I can't deal with it. I'm so tired. Maybe when I'm older. I just have a lot going on, and I can't deal with that right now. You know, I've kind of ignored my transition for the past couple of years because I've had other shit to do. You know, transitioning takes a lot of energy, and I don't have time for that. So I've kind of been ignoring it, and I wish I hadn't, because I've had all these feelings and questions kind of bottled up for a while. And that's a bad thing, you know, your transition never really stops. I'm sorry, I'm really sweaty. And I'm just, every time I look into the camera, I'm like, oh my god. That's partially why I make these videos black and white, you know, not just for the aesthetic or whatever, but because I'm so fucking sweaty all the time. So, I put a poll on my Twitter asking people an interesting question, and the results I got were very interesting, because I asked, in two separate polls, I did, do bigender people belong in female-only spaces? And do bigender people belong in male-only spaces? And, it was kind of interesting. It was like half and half between yes and not sure, and then there was like maybe 20% of no. And this was for both polls, it was the same. So it kind of seems like people don't know where to put bigender people, you know, which I find interesting, because I want to be in male spaces, and I want to be in female spaces, because I feel like I belong in both. But I'm afraid of making other people uncomfortable. Especially female-only spaces. Male-only spaces, I really don't give a shit about what men think. Just to be honest with you, I don't really care. But it is interesting that it was about equal for both. And when I say female-only spaces, I got a comment, someone saying, like, you know, what do you mean? You know, what's the context? And when I say female-only spaces, I'm really not talking about, like, for example, okay, some people are home, so I have to be a little iffy about this. The kind of work I do, and I will put text up about that because I can't say it out loud. Sometimes I want to be in those kind of spaces with women because that's who I really connect to when I'm doing work. I don't really connect to other men who do my work. I don't feel any kind of kinship with them, and partially because there's not very many, and there's not really a lot of spaces, which I have talked about. Or, for example, trans spaces. I hate trans men spaces. I hate them. They're awful. They're terrible. And trans women spaces are not perfect by any means, but how do I put this? Like, I feel both, like a connection to both. Like I belong in both. And I'm kind of hesitant to get attached to that idea because I know that if I do enter those spaces, especially female-only spaces, they won't want me there. And that's something I really struggle with personally, is feeling unwanted in places. I have like a real complex about it. So, and I don't want to make other people uncomfortable, you know. Like, I don't know how to put it. It's very difficult to conceptualize in my brain because, especially because I present so male and masculine, you know, will I make other women uncomfortable? And this is kind of how I felt, for example, when I go to the OBGYN and I'm in the lobby and I'm just sitting there looking like this, like a big, tall, stocky, bald-headed fat dude. And, feeling like I really don't belong there, and like they don't want me there, and I'm weird. Why am I here? Am I waiting for my wife or girlfriend? No. So I've already kind of had a taste of it, and I don't like it, and I hate it, and I don't want to do any more of it. So that's why I'm kind of nervous about getting too attached to the bigender label or any other non-binary, because bigender falls under non-binary, the umbrella. Okay, so let me explain to you how this works, because I realize a lot of people that follow me are cis or aren't really familiar with, sorry, the train's going by. There's a train right behind my house. Anyway, so not a lot of people are really familiar with these labels. So, what do they call them? Neo-labels, I think. So you have trans, let me see what's in here. You have trans on top, and then underneath the trans umbrella, here's the little umbrella, there's non-binary. And underneath non-binary, there is bigender. So it's like contained within. So people that are bigender, people that are non-binary, are trans. Some people that are non-binary or whatever don't identify as trans, and that's fine. You know, it's up to individual people. But generally speaking, non-binary people are trans, and bigender people are trans because they identify as a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth. They identify as both or many genders, you know. So I hope that it makes sense. I can make a more comprehensive video about this later, but I am actually really new to it. I didn't know much about neo-labels, because when I first started out being trans, I kind of spent a lot of time around true scum, or people that don't like non-binary people, essentially. They're, you know, binarist, or I can type it, but I can't say it. Whatever. They don't like non-binary people. And they think that they make trans people look bad, that they're faking it, or whatever. And I spent a lot of time around those people in my early transition, so I didn't get to learn a lot of this stuff until I was older, and I had gotten away from that toxic community. And it really kept me from my identity, because one of the things is that, and I think a lot of trans people can identify with this, even if you are binary trans, is the fear of not being trans enough. Like, for example, you know, if I'm bigender, am I no longer a trans person? And I realize, logically, it's a silly question, because of course you are. That's the nature of the term, you know, but I still worry. Uh-oh, my dogs are gonna start barking. Don't you dare! Oh god, here she goes. I have a chihuahua, so they bark a lot. Rosie! Rosie, are you barking? Okay, seems like they stopped. I know this video is very rambly, but that's what these Let's Talk videos are supposed to be. Me talking a lot. And, anyway, I'm interested to know if anyone else identifies as bigender, or Ma'am, can you please? I'm interested to know if anyone else identifies this way, and or if you've ever thought about these kind of things before. Yeah, so please let me know. Thank you.